Welcome to my analysis and short video on the basics of playing the Max Lange Gambit. Now, obviously these are only introductions to the Gambit, so they're not gospel, but they should give you a nice introduction into how to playing these exciting gambits, which are part of my Grandmaster Gambits course, which you can still buy on sale in the description. Now, the Max Lange is a gambit, and we're still dealing in this little mini series I'm doing on E4, E5. We're going to try to cover all the main sort of stuff that I cover in the Grandmaster Gambits course in these YouTube videos. And after knight f3, we're still on knight c6, and now we play bishop c4. And I do recommend you look at these videos in order that they come out, and this is the second one. And this is the same starting sequence as we had in the first video, but instead of bishop c5, which was the first video, we're now moving over to black's other main choice, which is knight to f6. Now this is the second most popular choice, and something you're going to face many times as well, and we're again playing in the most aggressive yet sound way that we can. And the move that we're now suggesting is d4. Now, in the last video against bishop c5, we were castling here and then playing d4. But the reason that we're playing d4 in this position is that black is threatening our pawn. And if we castle here, well, black can probably take that pawn quite safely. And one of the most important things if you want to improve at chess is always make sure you look at your opponent's move and figure out what they're trying to do. But after d4, we're now going to move into our sort of more Max Lange mainline things. And the line we're covering mainly here is pawn takes d4, and now we are castling, completing our development, and now bishop c5. And this is one of the two main options that black has. The other main option in this position is knight takes e4, but we're going to cover this in the next video, black's other main option. Now, can you remember all those moves? Well, let's just go through the starting rule 1 first, which hopefully you know from video 1. And rule 1 is very simply, we start with e4, knight to f3, and bishop c4. And this is against black's standard setup. And we also looked at rule 2 there. If black then continues by bringing his knight out, we hit in the center with our aggressive d4 move, opening up the position and entering the Max Lange. And the Max Lange is, well, it's something we're going to go into in a second, but it was named after the player, Max Lange, who even played us back as far as 1850s, and he's the guy who made this popular, this very dangerous opening. Now, I do expect with correct play, 100%, some lines black maybe obtains equality, but you're going to get that in most openings. But I still think this is a very interesting way to play. Now we can also, and it should be pointed out, get this same position from the move order we looked at in the first video with bishop c5, castles, knight to f6. Can you remember our move there? Well, we're always trying to play this d4 move. This is like the catalyst of our initiative, of our gambit, opening up the structure, allowing our bishop to come in. And in this position, if black now takes with the pawn, well, you might see some similarities. We're back into the Max Lange. So do be aware of move orders, but the move order we're concentrating on here is d4. Now black invariably takes on d4 because it's the best move. If he tries to grab the other pawn, we can simply capture on e5, and these little sidelines you should know about, but they're not worrying. And one big threat here is bishop takes f7, king takes f7, queen d5 check, doing a nasty little fork on the king and knight. We can also play queen d5 immediately, which is an immediate fork, attacking the knight, threatening checkmate. Things to watch out for. So that's why black has to take our d4. He has to do something in the center of the board. And the move d4 is creating pressure, really going for our opponent straight away. And we now castle because we want to use the open e line for our rook and just look at the safety of the two kings. Black now has to play very carefully to avoid getting in serious trouble. Now, like I mentioned, knight to e4 will be covered in the next video. Something like bishop e7 or any other move, we have two nice choices. One of them is e5, which is a very nice way to just continue. And even knight takes d4 is the move we mainly give in our Grandmaster Gambits course. And the point of this is, if black captures on e4, knight to f5 is very dangerous for black. But back to the main line, and after castles, bishop c5, we now have to start an attack because we are a pawn down, and that's where we're going to start having a lot of our fun. And we're going to play e5 in this position. And this asks the knight the question, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, boy? Hey, boy? And now black must play the good move d5, this counter strike in the middle of the board. This d5 move, well worth remembering. It's a typical way to meet the push e5 with d5. Black gets space, black counterattacks. Always the move to watch out for when this pawn comes forwards. Now, if the knight goes somewhere, white is just going to get a very nice and easy position. For example, knight e4, we can just attack that with our queen, I think is the most correct way of playing. And if black tries to defend, we can capture on pass on, and that knight is in a lot of trouble. Now, knight to g4 is maybe a better idea, attacking this pawn, but after we simply defend the pawn, develop a piece. So again, we're looking at what our opponent's doing. Our opponent's attacking that pawn. We defend the pawn in a way that improves our position. And now we're going to play h3, and when the knight retreats, we can get rid of that knight, and that will damage black's pawn structure. So this is also good for white. Hence why d5 is played. And now we get a funny little sequence, which I feel is very important to remember, and it leads to a brilliantly fascinating and exciting position. A position that should at least tempt you into playing these lines and enjoying some fun positions and games. And our e-pawn, Eddie the Eagle, a famous ski jumper from England, if there ever was an oxymoron, that might be it, now goes munching. He takes on f6. Let's just use that pawn to capture. And after black takes on c4, it takes on g7. And this is another reason we castled before. We wanted to wait until black moved that bishop away, because we don't want black taking on g7. And now after rook g8, we come to our third rule, and a very important move I feel you should play here. First played back in 1914 in Baden-Baden, a little spa town on the border of Germany and Switzerland, very famous for its chess, with Frani versus Tartakova, is bishop g5. And this is an improvement that we give in the course, it's well known, over the more commonly played rook e1 check. Rook e1 looks very natural, but we want to save that move. And bishop g5 develops the bishop with tempo. Now this position is just fascinating. It's equal on material, but very unbalanced. Our king is certainly safer than our opponent's king, and things to watch out for are, we don't want to allow that king to castle queenside. If it can, we could be under pressure then on the g-file, so we want to try to keep that king there, and we're going to make sure we do that over the course of the next couple of moves. And other things to bear in mind is we want to use the e-file. And what about our remaining pieces? Where our knight on b1, and we'll come to these rules again a little bit later, wants to come to d2, potentially just take that pawn on c4, otherwise come into e4. And another important thing to bear in mind, middle game wise, is our queen often wants to come into the game on the dark squares. So via d2, f4, and even g5. And if you remember these moves, you should get a very good game. And the problem black has is always his king is in more trouble than ours. Now, theory thinks this is maybe just about equal for black, but myself and Richard are not so sure. And we think we prefer white, and only if black avoids a lot of tricks here. But let's just go over that rule number 3, just so you can get it stuck in your mind. So rule number 3 is bishop c5, the move we're concentrating on this video after we castle, is met by our e-pawn stomping down the board. e5, take the knight, take the pawn, threaten to queen, and then we bring our bishop flying out. Bishop g5 is better than the more common rook e1, And our G pawn is a very useful attacking tool, and we're going to have the E file to attack along later on. So if you remember those rules, you already get into a great way of thinking. And this is where black has to be very careful, because the best move found by Tartakova is actually bishop e7. In our eyes, every other move, and again we've checked everything with computers deeply, every other move apart from this leaves black in a very bad position. And after bishop g5, it's quite tempting to play other moves here. What happens if black moves the queen? Well, if he goes queen d6, this is walking into our idea at some point of knight developing to one of these two squares with tempo. The queen is in a very unfortunate position for our knight coming in and hitting it. I'd first flick in a check, and after that is blocked, remember black wants to castle, but he can't at the moment because our bishop on g5. We don't want to allow that one, but we simply continue developing. You could even say these lines are not gambit lines because we're not a pawn down even, but they kind of are because we are gambiting earlier on. And now we have the simple idea to go to f6. Ideally, we want to come to f6 check, I would say, but we can also consider taking the pawn. So after something like queen d5, the knight comes in here, and black's in a really horrible situation. That knight's going to land there. If he tries to block that one more move I want to show you, which comes up a lot in this video, but also the next video we'll do, bishop f6. And this is a really powerful move. It's very hard for black to actually play something constructive here. And even when you're attacking, even when you play gambit plays, I want these gambits. And one idea that we did with the whole course is to improve your overall game. They're not superficial. They're going to give you a better way and a unique way of looking at chess. And we want to get into the spirit of thinking, right, not just what you're trying to achieve, but what your opponent is doing and how can you stop that. In these gambit courses like here, try to think what your opponent can do. For example, we said about castling. Well, if black castles now, what will you do? And you've got to get in this way of thinking to progress as a chess player. And that's what we're also trying to teach you with the Grandmaster Gambits course. And remember, if you want to support my videos, it's on sale at the moment. You can go there and purchase that one, get yourself a great opening. But with this position, the problem is he can't castle because we now get rid of the f6 square, and we're going to at least win the exchange, which should be good enough. Now back to bishop g5. If queen d5, there's a lovely little move here which people often forget about. Don't always play, in a way that, oh yeah, I'm always going to put my piece in the same squares. Well, there's a better square for the knight now, and this is something to always look out for when the queen comes there. c3. If we can develop with tempo, we should do. And this move is very prominent in the next video, so make sure you get into it now. And after the queen moves, well, we can give a check, and yet again our knight comes to this powerful square with similar ideas to what we just saw. The final move after bishop g5 where black can go wrong is f6, and this has been played by some strong players. Laurent Fresnay, Magnus Carlsen's one of his seconds. Very strong French Grandmaster has played this and lost to Nigel Short, Nigel with the white pieces. And now after rook e1 check, black really has to move his king. But bishop h6 means that we keep this g pawn. And a key idea here is, well, we want to get our queen in the game. We've still got the knight maneuver to get that last piece in. But in this way, we're not keen on the dark squares. We want to get our queen to h5. So after something like rook e8, let's play knight d2, trying to get this one in. And again, this pawn ensures us a good game with our safer king. If the rook comes off, I now suggest you play knight takes e1, because there's only one way to stop our queen getting to h5. That's queen d5, and now we have the lovely tactic knight takes c4. Going a pawn up, keeping the initiative. If this knight is now taken, our queen would fly in, and Gary, the g pawn, is landing. Or our queen is landing, for example. So let's just run through these moves again so you get a grip to the starting move order. Stage 1, bishop c4. Stage 2, against knight to f6, we now play d4 because black could take that pawn, but we want to do something in the center immediate. Our favorite gambit move, d4. We're playing d4 in every line against e5 at some point, in every rule of pairs Spanish kind of position. Black has to capture, and now we're accelerating our development by castling. Knight takes e4, the other main line will be looked at later. Against bishop c5 is the e-pawn's time to shine, and shine it blooming well does. The bishop should develop rather than the rook, and now we come to the best move, bishop e7, and now we have to take on e7. And again, Black has to be very careful here. He has to play king takes e7. This is such a hard move for someone who doesn't know the opening to find. Because the other moves are just going to be worse for Black, no fight. For example, he captures one of the other pieces, d4, we win that pawn, and we just have a safe advantage. For example, knight takes. Now we can even swap queens. We saw this idea in the first video. If it works, it works. Don't be afraid to swap queens, even if it's a Gambit course. Funnily enough, we talk about the ending a lot in this Grandmaster Gambit course. It's one way to get into a good ending is by playing very aggressively. And the key move after rook takes g7 here, where we have equal material, is knight b5. And this leaves Black in a lot of trouble due to our ongoing initiative. Now if queen takes e7, well, we simply play knight takes d4. And just look at where the kings are. Our king may look a little bit exposed on the g-file, but we can always play g3 to stop that attack. And after something like rook g7, it's clear that Black is in a lot of trouble with bishop e6, knight f5 coming, winning material. So king takes e7 played, and now we play rook e1 check. It's time to play this move. And now the king should come to f6, another really hard move to find. And we're really putting the emphasis on our opponent to find these moves. If he blocks with a more logical bishop e6, we can just play rook e4, and as top computer programs confirm, this is much better for white. We just want to win this pawn back with a good game because our opponent's king. For example, rook takes g7, knight takes d4, and let's say there's a capture here. We don't want to exchange queens now because our opponent's king is there. And after this one with one threat, g3 is fine, but I prefer the more active queen f3. Our queen is on a very nice square. We've got our knight coming in, our last rook coming to line up against that king. It's equal on material, but we have a much better game. So again, Black has to find king to f6, and now we bring in our last piece, knight bd2. So let's have a look at rule number 4. So rule number 4, after bishop g7, Black must find bishop e7, king takes e7, and king takes f6. Not easy. We're going to gather momentum by bringing our knight into the center and our queen in on the dark squares. The dark squares, my friend. And we can see with knight d2, there's two ideas. We want to probably take that pawn, but in other cases just come to e4. And once we've got that last knight running in, it's time to bring the queen in. And on this case, the dark squares is where we bring the queen in. Now, king takes g7 is the move commonly recommended as Black's main option. Now, let's quickly cover other ideas, but we won't dwell on them too long. Queen takes d5 has been played, but it runs into a very nice idea here. Quite similar to when we took on c4 and got our queen to h5. And let's remember, with our opponent's king so dodgily placed, it's no surprise that in some situations such tactics work. What is the idea of this tactic? Well, it's to divert the queen away after we captured it and allow our queen to come in on these dark squares. And this really emphasizes the point of the queen coming in on the dark squares. There's some horrible threats of checkmate over here. So Black has to try this one, and now we come in with check. If the king goes to h8, it will be mated, check, checkmate, very nice finish. And if the king comes to f8, we can continue our attack with a very nice move here, rook to e8 check. And yes, we're a piece down, but after rook e1, we have a ginormous attack, and Black hasn't developed his queen side, and this again, as the computer confirms, is very good for us. So after king f6, knight d2, well, what else can be played? Well, bishop e6 has been played against me in a couple of occasions, and this is one way where Black is trying to hold on to that useful pawn. But I feel that after, now we can't take on c4, we come the other way, and now we just continue with our standard idea of getting the queen in on dark squares. Yes, we are a pawn down, but our opponent's king is weak. Our two knights, rook and queen, combine in a great initiative. Queen g5 is a nasty attack, so black can try this nice centralizing move, queen d5, but after queen f4 we keep the initiative. We may just win our pawn back, and if we win our pawn back we're going to have an ongoing attack. We have ideas of coming to f6 with the queen and with the knight, and let's not forget the g5 square. We can bring one of our knights to g5, maybe the e1, so the rook can come in, and you can see that our attack is still very much burning here. A rook to d1 also looks logical. So these are all positions which I'd much rather be white in. So king g7 has been given better, but now we're going to win that pawn on c4, and black plays king h8, a line which is given in many resources as equalizing, but in mine and my co-author's ideas, Richard Palliser, that is not the case. We can now play knight to e5, and this keeps the pressure up. And I'm just going to show you a bit more theory than I did in the last video here. But first of all, there was a game between two grandmasters, Karpatchev and Glenn Fleer, in 2011, where Glenn went wrong with queen f6. So easy for black to go wrong. But this position is still very nice for white. White has the ongoing pressure in such a situation. Even again, just bringing the queen in, bringing the rook in is very nice to be played. But the simple knight takes here and just taking the pawn back will again lead to a very nice position for us. There's no need to do anything extravagant. So knight takes e5 is the main move, and now after this one, well, queen f6 here again just runs into queen takes d4. We're a pawn up, so queen to d5 is better, threatening checkmate, and this is where we have to do one defensive move, but we're very solid here. And now after bishop h3, yes, black has a couple of threats, and here I would just suggest we've got to admit our opponent's defending quite well, and sometimes if our opponent defends perfectly, we're going to have to not win quickly. But after queen f3, forcing the exchange of queens, we're attacking the c5 pawn, and now our rook comes into e7, and here white has the initiative. It's equal on material, a much easier game, and I would prefer to be white in this position. So this whole line is a little bit under a cloud, but let's just have a look at those last rules again. We looked at rule 4, and the last rule I wanted to look at was if black brings his king to f6, and generally we want to take that pawn with our knight there in the position, but if black defends that pawn, our knight will come into the center and our queen comes up. But let's remember the queen maneuver. You can see the queen on the starting square going one square forwards and then on the diagonal towards the opponent's king is a very important idea in this whole thing. Now I have to admit, at top level, this opening is still played. In my experience, the move bishop c5 is not as commonly played because it leads to these positions where black is still trying to find a way just to get equality. The more common move is knight takes e4. That's in the next video. We'll come to that later on. I won't give anything away there. Let's do one gambit line at a time. But bishop c5 is, I think, adequately dealt by following our rules. So rule 1, we saw the pieces come out. Rule 2, we get d4 in. Rule 3, we use our e-pawn to go forwards. Rule 4, we get our knight in and our rook in. And rule 5, we move our pieces depending where our opponent goes. Now, of course, in the Grandmaster Gambits course, we analyze all these lines in way much more depth. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to give you a nice introduction so you can go and give these ideas a go. If you do want to support me and you do want to learn more about the ins and outs of these gambits, the really deep theoretical lines, so you've got a great lifelong lasting gambit course, then you can follow the link below, support me, and that's a great way to support me by buying the course, but also help yourself to have a gambit course and a way to play in the most aggressive fashion possible. So I'll be very thankful if you did that. Of course, it helps me do more of these videos, but thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe as well. goodbye until my next Gambits video.